This painting was created with a combination of clear acrylic glazing medium and watercolor paint. I just used a regular pan of Prang watercolors. What I'm doing is I'm anywhere from 10 to 12 objects overlapping in my picture. So you can use photographs, you can use pictures from magazines, you can use actual physical parts of a still life, which is what I did with the apple and the pear. They were actually parts of a still life that I actually used from real life. You could use plastic or real flowers or photographs. I used photographs of birds. You're going to overlap these items. So every single item in the picture is going to be either in front of something or hidden partially underneath something. So everything's going to be very densely packed. If you draw flowers, don't draw the stem. If you're drawing fruit, don't draw the bowl that it's sitting in. If you're drawing a bird, don't draw the tree or any sort of background. The only background that's going to be in this picture are those little tiny shapes in between all the objects just poking through. So I don't want to have an excessive amount of background space. You're also going to create a single light source. So what I'm doing is I am putting shadows underneath and to the left-hand side of each object so that the lighting is consistent throughout the entire picture. Now, when you go to paint, you're going to paint the background first. So I'm taking blue watercolor paint and I'm putting it in the mixing tray. And I'm going to put in the mixing tray clear acrylic glazing medium. And I'm going to take the blue paint and mix it with the glazing medium, and I'm going to now paint in all the spots where the sky is showing through. Again, we're not going to have a detailed background. We're just going to have these little small shapes of sky where the overlapping items didn't quite cover every single thing in this densely packed composition. So I'm just doing a clear glaze. You should be able to see the white of the paper through the glazing medium. It should be just slightly tinted blue. So that's how you know it's a transparent glaze. If the paint gets very thick, just wipe your brush on the paper towel that you see I have there, and then just wipe over it so that you don't have big globs of color. Next, I'm going to start painting one of the flowers. So I'm using some magenta watercolors. Now, the way you paint the petals of the flowers is you put down the glazing medium first on just one single petal. Then you go over it with just the pure paint, and then you wipe everything off your brush so it's totally dry and empty, and you blend the paint out. When you paint, you're going to paint in the direction of the actual petal. And you actually start at the middle and go out so that the color gradually fades off as it gets away from the middle of the flower. If it doesn't fade off, you wipe off the brush and the paper towel and you paint over it again, but always in the correct direction so it's like you're actually painting on the physical petal of a flower. And the trick is to do one petal at a time. Each petal is its own shape and has its own shadows. So as you can see, I'm just going around until all the petals are filled in. And it's not white paint, it's the clear acrylic glazing medium that's allowing the color to fade out. So you see I put the pure hue on top, and then I'm blending it out with the glazing medium. And if it stays too dark, I wipe my brush off, and with a dry, empty brush, I can pull the paint out and it will gradually fade. I'm also lifting my brush slightly as I paint out, so there's less pressure on the paper as I go, and that's helping the colors to fade and blend. So now I'm going to paint my bird. For the bird, I'm actually taking the pure blue, and I'm painting in some of the feathers, and then I'm going to paint with the glazing medium, and it's going to mix with the blue and spread it out. If the paint gets too thick, just wipe it on the paper towel. You don't need to wash it. You're not switching colors. You're wiping off the extra paint, and you're spreading the paint that's already down on the paper, and the glazing medium is mixing with the color. And the idea is, and you'll know you're doing it correctly, is that you see your pencil shading through the transparent paint. You're not hiding your underlying drawing, you're enhancing it. So if it's not a transparent glaze and you're hiding your underlying drawing, you're going to have to wipe off that brush and spread the color out a little bit. When I paint a bird, I paint in the direction of the feathers, as if I'm petting the bird's feathers, not ruffling them. And now I'm going to do the parrot. Again, I want to paint in the direction that the bird's feathers actually go, as if I'm petting the bird and not ruffling its feathers. Then I'm going to paint with a glazing medium while the paint's still wet and spread out that color so I can see the drawing and shading underneath. If the paint has too much texture, you are not doing it correctly and you need to spread the paint out more. So as you can see, the paint has a lot of texture here, and I'm going to have to go over it and spread the paint out more. Don't wash your brush in order to do that, or you're just adding water into the mix and it starts getting runny. Instead, wipe the excess off on the paper towel, as you can see I'm doing constantly, and then you spread the paint out. And it works just beautifully. If you accidentally mess up and the color spreads where you do not want it to, wash your brush and then dry it on the paper towel, and then use the brush like an empty sponge to soak up the excess fluid, and then just wipe it on the paper towel. And keep doing that until whatever puddle you've created is sucked up and gone. A lot of people tend to mess up by using a paper towel to soak up extra paint, and the problem is it just sort of blots and spreads out everywhere. You don't have as much control. Whereas if you take a wet brush and you soak up the extra paint by drying the brush and then just soaking up the extra paint, and just keep doing that, you'll see the excess paint just sucks right out, comes right off, as long as you do it before it is dry. And I just did that around the eye. Now I'm going to do the apple. Again, I'm using the pure hue of paint. And then I'm going to take glazing medium, and I'm going to paint as if I'm painting on a spherical apple. It's round, so I use curved brush strokes. I lift my brush slightly as I paint out from the edge, and you can see that the color fades off as I'm lifting my brush. You start at the edge, and you just drag the paint out, lifting your brush slightly. And I just keep alternating between the glazing medium and the pigment from the watercolor brushes, from the watercolor set. And I keep doing that until I get the exact color combination that I want, keeping in mind that the light is coming from above, from the right-hand side, and that I want the shadow on the lower left-hand edge to help to make the apple look like it's more three-dimensional. Now the trick with shadows is you take a color, and to create the shadow you mix it with its opposite. The opposite of red is green. So I'm actually going to take a little bit of red and a little bit of green and mix them together and use that to create a little shadow on the bottom left-hand edge of the apple. And again, I don't want to have a harsh shadow. I want to fade into the apple. So I'm very careful to mix the color and then press down and lift off with a brush. And if it creates too harsh a shadow, I wipe off the extra and I spread it out. I'll show you that in just a moment. And you can still see the white of the paper through the apple because I'm using transparent glazes. After it dries, you can always add another layer of color. So now I've mixed the green and the red, and now I'm adding in the shadow. And notice I lift my brush slightly as I go out from the shadow so that it fades as it goes towards the light. And I can create quite a realistic shadow there without using brown or black, just by using a color and its opposite. And the next thing I'm going to work on is the pear. So I've decided to put some yellow down first, then add the green, so it's yellow-green, then add the glazing medium. I'm going to play around with the pear a little bit, and then I'm going to mix some red with the green to get the shadow color. It's still green, it just has a little bit of red in it. And mixed together, it creates the shadow for the pear. And I will continue this process throughout the rest of the painting. This is Rachel Winneberg, the Helpful Art Teacher, showing you how to use clear acrylic glazing medium with watercolor paint to create a beautiful painting.